The sky burned like fire as the ship fell from the stars. Jace could feel every part of the metal body tearing apart as alarms screamed in his ears. His hands tried to hold the controls, but nothing worked. Flames danced outside the window. The planet below rushed closer, and he knew he was not going to die in space. He was going to die down there. The crash was like the end of the world. The ship hit the ground with a sound louder than thunder. Everything shook. Pieces of metal flew everywhere, and then there was silence. Jace lay in the wreckage, smoke around him, his head spinning. He could taste blood in his mouth. His chest hurt with every breath. But he was alive. Somehow he had survived. He pushed himself out of the broken ship. The air was thick and heavy, and every breath felt strange, not like Earth. He looked around and saw a jungle like no jungle he had ever seen before. Trees with black leaves, taller than buildings, plants that move as if they were alive, and a sky filled with two suns. The ground was wet and smelled like something rotten. He was on an alien world, alone. Jace tried to stay calm. He told himself, survive first. Think later. His ship was gone. The radio was broken. No signal. No one would come for him. He started looking for food, water, anything useful. He found a piece of metal pipe from the ship and kept it as a weapon. Because he could hear sounds in the distance, strange sounds, growls, he walked slowly, every step careful. The jungle was full of noises, something moving in the shadows, and he felt eyes watching him. He stopped when he heard a low growl behind him. His heart jumped. He turned slowly and saw them two small creatures standing on four legs. They had dark fur with silver stripes, glowing yellow eyes, and sharp little teeth. They looked like predator babies, like wolf cubs but bigger. Jace froze. He thought, if these are babies, where's the mother? His hand tightened on the metal pipe. The cubs growled again, low and soft. Then something strange happened. Instead of attacking, they walked closer and sniffed his hand. One of them rubbed its head against his arm like a cat. The other one made a sound, almost like a soft cry. Then both sat near his legs, looking at him with wide eyes. Jace did not move. He whispered to himself, what the hell is going on? The cubs stayed with him. They were not afraid. They were not angry. They were friendly. Maybe they were too young to know he was not one of them. Maybe they thought he was their pack. Jace slowly lowered the pipe and sat down. The cubs came closer and curled against him. He felt their warm fur, and for a moment, he almost forgot he was in danger. But then the ground shook. A deep sound rolled through the jungle. A roar so loud it made his bones feel cold. The cubs lifted their heads, their ears up, and then they made soft cries, like calling for someone. Jace knew what that meant. The mother was coming, and if these little ones were this big, what would the mother look like? He stood up quickly, heart pounding. His eyes searched the trees. He could hear heavy steps. Something huge moving closer. The roar came again, louder, closer. The cubs ran to the edge of the clearing, tails wagging like they were happy. Jace wanted to run. But where? The jungle was full of unknown dangers, and the thing coming sounded like a monster. Branches broke like sticks as the predator appeared. It was enormous, taller than any bear on Earth. Its body covered in black fur with silver marks like fire. Its head was shaped like a wolf, but its jaws were longer, and when it opened its mouth, Jace saw rows of teeth shining in the sunlight. Its eyes glowed bright yellow, and they locked on him. Jace could not breathe. He thought, this is it. This is how I die. His legs felt like stone. He wanted to run, but he could not move. The predator growled, a sound like thunder, and stepped closer. The ground shook. With every step, the cubs ran to it and rubbed against its legs, making soft, happy sounds. The predator looked down at them, then back at Jace. Jace raised the metal pipe, knowing it would not help. Come on then, he whispered, his voice shaking. The predator stopped, tilted its head like it was curious, and sniffed the air. Jace waited for the attack, but it never came. Instead, the giant beast bent its head. Closer, sniffed Jace again, and made a low sound, almost like a growl but softer. Then, to his shock, the predator turned around and walked back into the jungle. The cubs followed a few steps, but then stopped and came back to Jace, curling around. His legs, He stood there shaking, unable to believe what just happened. Why didn't it kill him? Why did it leave? He looked down at the cubs, and they looked back at him with those glowing eyes, as if he was part of them now. Then he heard another sound, not a roar, but something else. A sharp whistle cutting through the air. A spear struck the ground next to him, sticking deep into the soil. Jace turned slowly and saw shapes moving in the shadows. Tall figures with weapons, watching him. The cubs growled, and Jace gripped his metal pipe. His nightmare was just beginning. Jace stood frozen, his eyes locked on the figures moving in the shadows. They were tall, taller than any human, their bodies covered in dark armor that looked like bone. In their hands were long weapons, sharp and deadly. The spear that had landed next to him still shook in the ground. Humming like it carried power, the cubs growled softly. They're for standing up. They stood in front of Jace like tiny guards, but Jace knew they were just babies. They could not fight those hunters. Jace gripped the metal pipe tighter, sweat dripping from his face, his heart hammered in his chest. He whispered to himself, "Stay calm, stay alive." One of the figures stepped forward, slowly. It had glowing green eyes behind a mask, and its voice was a deep hiss as it spoke in a language Jace did not know. The sound was strange, like metal scraping on stone. Then the figure raised a hand and pointed at him. Two others moved closer, their weapons ready. Jace's mind raced. He thought, "Do they think I am with the predators? Are they here for the cubs, or for me?" He wanted to run, but his legs felt heavy. The hunters spread out, surrounding him. They moved like shadows, quiet and fast. The cubs pressed against his legs, making soft whining sounds. Then, one of the hunters threw something on the ground. It cracked open and released smoke that smelled like fire and blood. Jace coughed and waved his hand, but the smoke burned his throat. He heard the cubs cry. Then everything happened fast. The first hunter leaped forward, its spear aimed at Jace. He swung the metal pipe with all his strength. It hit the spear, and sparks flew. The force knocked Jace back. He fell to the ground, the cubs screaming beside him. The hunter raised its weapon again, and Jace thought, "This is the end." But the jungle roared, a sound so loud the air shook. Trees bent as something huge moved through them. The hunters froze, their glowing eyes turning toward the sound. The roar came again, closer now. Then, like a shadow from a nightmare, the predator appeared. It was bigger than before, its black fur shining, its teeth glowing white in the twin suns. Its eyes burned like fire as it stepped into the clearing. The hunters hissed and raised their weapons. The predator opened its mouth and roared, the sound like thunder tearing the sky apart. Birds flew from the trees. The ground trembled. Jace felt the roar in his bones. The cubs ran to their mother, crying softly. The predator bent down, sniffed them, then turned its gaze on the hunters. It stepped in front of Jace, its massive body like a wall of muscle and fur. Jace stared in shock. The predator was protecting him. The hunters spoke again in that harsh language. One of them fired a weapon. A bolt of red light shot out and burned into the predator's shoulder. The beast roared in pain and fury. Then it moved like lightning, faster than Jace thought possible. It leaped on the first hunter, its jaws closing around the alien's head. The sound was terrible. Bones breaking, blood spraying. Jace crawled back, heart pounding. He wanted to run, but the cubs stayed near him, clinging to his legs. The predator killed another hunter with one swipe of its claws. The rest tried to fight, but they were nothing against this monster. It was like watching a storm destroy everything in its path. Then, silence. The ground was covered with broken bodies, dark blood soaking the soil. The predator stood in the middle, its chest rising and falling, its eyes still burning. Jace looked at it, unable to believe what he had seen. It had saved him. The beast turned slowly and walked to Jace. The cubs ran to it, happy sounds in their throats. The predator bent down and sniffed Jace again. Its hot breath washed over him. He gripped the pipe tightly, his hands shaking. The predator growled, low and deep. Then it did something Jace did not expect. It dropped a piece of meat in front of him, fresh from the kill, and stepped back, watching him. The meaning was clear. It was giving him food. Jace looked at the meat, then at the beast. His mind spun. Why? Why was it doing this? Was it because of the cubs or something else? He felt their eyes on him, the cubs wagging their tails like happy dogs. The predator standing like a black mountain behind them, before he could move. Another sound came from the jungle, not a roar, not a hiss, but something colder, a mechanical hum. The hunters were not alone. Jace turned and saw lights moving between the trees. Bright blue lights and the sound of machines. More hunters were coming, and they were bringing something worse. Jace picked up the meat, his hands trembling. His mind screamed only one word: run. Jace ran through the jungle, his breath sharp and fast. The cubs ran beside him, their small bodies leaping over roots and rocks. Behind him, the predator moved like a shadow, silent but powerful, carrying the smell of blood and war. The lights from the hunters glowed brighter behind the trees, and the sound of machines grew louder. The ground shook as something heavy landed in the distance. Jace glanced back and saw shapes moving between the black trees. Not just hunters, but machines, tall like towers, their legs crashing through the jungle like steel animals. They carried weapons that glowed blue and hissed with power. Jace's heart froze. This was not a fight, this was an invasion. He tried to keep moving, his lungs burning. Every sound felt like danger, every shadow like death. He clutched the metal pipe in one hand and held the meat in the other. The cubs stayed close, their glowing eyes full of trust. They did not fear him. They believed he was part of their pack. The predator followed without a sound. Its steps were soft, almost gentle, but Jace could feel its presence like a storm behind him. He looked back once and saw its eyes burning in the dark, watching him, protecting him. The image burned into his mind. This creature was not just an animal. It was something more. Then, a sharp crack split the air. A spear shot past his face and hit a tree with a sound like thunder. Blue light sparked. Where it struck, burning the bark to ash, Jace ducked and rolled behind a fallen log. The cubs pressed against him, shaking. The predator stopped, its body low, its muscles tight like steel wires ready to snap. Voices filled the air, harsh and cold. The hunters were close now. Jace could see them through the trees, glowing eyes, masks of bone, weapons that shimmered like lightning. They moved slowly, carefully, like they were hunting not just the predator, but him. Jace's hands shook as he gripped the pipe. His mind screamed, I can't fight them. I'll die here. One hunter raised a weapon and fired. The bolt of blue energy tore through the log and scorched the ground near his head. Heat burned his skin. The cubs cried and pressed against his legs. Then the predator moved, faster than Jace could see. One moment it was behind him, the next it was on the hunter. A roar ripped the jungle apart, and the hunter's scream ended. In silence, the others fired, bolts of light tearing through the darkness. Trees exploded. Smoke filled the air. The predator roared again and leaped into the fight, ripping metal and flesh. Jace crawled backward, pulling the cubs with him. He knew he could not stay. He had to run while the beast fought. But then he saw something in the trees, something that made his blood turn cold. A figure taller than all the hunters, standing still, watching. Its armor was black like the night sky, and its mask glowed with a single red eye. It held no weapon, but Jace felt its power like fire in his bones. This was their leader. The leader raised its hand, and the machines moved. Their legs crushed trees. Their weapons hummed with energy. They did not aim at the predator. They aimed at the ground. Jace realized too late what they were doing. The machines fired, and the earth exploded. Rocks and soil flew into the air. The ground under Jace split open. He grabbed the cubs and rolled as a hole opened where he had been. Heat burned his back. Smoke and dust filled his lungs. He coughed and crawled, clutching the cubs. His mind screamed, "Run! Run! Run!" He stumbled into a narrow path between twisted roots. The predator was still fighting, its roar echoing through the trees. Hunters screamed and died, but there were too many. Jace wanted to help, but he could do nothing. He was just a man with a pipe and fear in his chest. The cubs whimpered softly, their bodies shaking. Jace pulled them close and whispered, "It's okay. It's okay." Even though nothing was okay, he heard the machines moving, their heavy steps crushing the forest. The leader's voice rang through the air, cold and sharp. He could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. They were hunting him, not just the predator. Jace ran again, deeper into the jungle. The roots tore at his clothes, branches scratched his face. He could hear water ahead, a river. Maybe he could hide, maybe he could escape. He pushed through the last line of trees and saw it, a wide river shining like silver under the twin suns. The water moved fast, crashing over dark rocks. He looked back, lights moving through the jungle. The machines were coming, the hunters were close. He had no choice. He hugged the cubs, one under each arm, and jumped. The cold water hit him like a wall, dragging him under. He kicked and fought, his lungs burning. The cubs clung to him, their claws scratching his arms. The river pulled them like a monster, spinning and crushing. Jace gasped for air, his mind filled with one thought: survive. He saw light above the water and kicked harder, breaking the surface with a gasp. The river carried him fast, trees flashing past. The cubs were still with him, their glowing eyes wide with fear. Behind them, on the shore, he saw shadows, hunters watching. The leader stood still, its red eye burning like fire. And then Jace heard it, above the roar of the river, a sound that froze his blood, a deep growl, low and cold, coming from ahead. The river bent around a black cave, and from that cave came the sound, a predator, but not the one he knew, something worse. The river dragged Jace like a living beast, twisting and pulling him through the current. The cubs clung to him with their tiny claws, their glowing eyes wide with fear. He kicked hard, fighting to keep their heads above the water. The roar of the river filled his ears, but above it came another sound, deep and cold, a growl that seemed to crawl inside his bones. The cave opened ahead like the mouth of a giant beast, black and endless. The sound came from inside. Jace's chest tightened. He wanted to turn back, but the current was too strong. It pulled him into the darkness, the light from the twin suns fading behind him. The air grew cold, heavy. The water slowed but swirled in circles, whispering against the stone. Jace clung to the cubs, his arms aching. His breath came in short gasps. His body shook from the cold. The cubs pressed against him, making soft whines, trying to comfort him or themselves. He whispered, "It's okay, we'll make it." Even though he didn't believe it, the growl came again, louder now, echoing through the cave. Jace's heart hammered, his eyes darted around, searching for a way out. The cave walls glowed faintly with strange light, veins of blue running through the stone like rivers of fire. Shadows moved on the walls, shapes too big to be real. Then he saw it, rising from the dark water ahead. At first, he thought it was the rock, but then it moved, a long shape, covered in black scales. Its head came up slowly, water pouring off its jaws. Its eyes glowed red, brighter than the hunter's lights, and its teeth were long and curved like blades. Jace froze, his body stiff with terror. The cubs whimpered and pressed against him. The creature slid closer, its body so long he couldn't see where it ended. The water rippled with its slow, deadly movement. It opened its mouth and hissed, a sound like steam and fire. Jace gripped the metal pipe tighter, his fingers numb. He knew it was useless. This was not a fight he could win. The creature lunged, the water exploding around it. Jace threw himself to the side, holding the cubs close. The jaws snapped shut where he had been, the sound like stone breaking. He kicked hard, pushing toward a narrow ledge of rock. The cubs clung to him as he climbed out of the water, his hands slipping on the wet stone. The creature struck again, its head smashing into the ledge, sending shards of rock flying. Jace felt the air burn as its teeth missed his leg by inches. He scrambled higher, dragging the cubs with him. His chest burned, his arms screamed with pain. The creature roared, the sound shaking the cave. It pulled back and lunged again. But this time something stopped it. A shadow moved behind Jace, massive and silent. A roar filled the cave, louder than the monster's hiss. Jace turned and saw glowing eyes, the suns in the dark. The predator had followed him. It leaped into the water, hitting the scaled creature with a force that made the cave shake. The water exploded, waves crashing against the walls. Jace held the cubs tight and crawled higher, watching as the two giants fought. Teeth tore flesh, claws ripped scales. The sound was like thunder trapped in stone. The predator roared and bit into the creature's neck. The scaled beast screamed and thrashed, its tail smashing into the walls. Cracking the stone, water sprayed like rain. Jace covered the cubs with his body, his ears ringing from the sound. Then, silence, broken only by the drip of water. The predator climbed out of the water, blood running from its mouth. Its fur was torn, deep cuts on its body, but its eyes still burned bright. In its jaws hung the broken head of the river beast. It dropped the head on the rocks and turned to Jace. The cubs ran to it, crying softly. The predator bent down, licking them, making low sounds like comfort. Then it looked at Jace, its eyes glowing in the dark. Jace stared back, shaking. He didn't know if it saw him as a friend or food. The predator stepped closer. Jace gripped the pipe, his heart pounding. The beast sniffed him, its hot breath washing over his face. Then it did something strange. It pushed its head against him, gently, almost like a nod. Jace froze, his mind racing. Was this trust? Was this a bond? Before he could think, a sound came from deep in the cave. Not a growl, not a hiss, but a voice. A cold, metallic voice that echoed off the stone. Jace turned his head, fear crawling up his spine. Lights flickered in the dark, bright blue lights. The hunters had followed, and they were not alone. Machines stepped out of the shadows, their glowing eyes like ghosts. They had tracked him through the river, through the cave, and now they stood between him and escape. Jace felt the cubs press against his legs, the predator growling low, ready for war. Jace gripped the pipe and whispered, "We fight." Even though he knew the truth, this was not just survival anymore, this was war. The cave shook with the sound of machines. Blue lights cut through the darkness, cold and sharp. Jace pressed against the wet stone, his breath coming fast. The cubs stayed close to him, their tiny bodies shaking. Behind them, the predator stood, like a shadow carved from rock, its eyes glowing like the sun's, its claws dripping with the blood of the river beast. The hunters stepped forward slowly, their armor glowing in the cave light. They were not like the first group. These were stronger, their armor black with silver marks. Their weapons hummed with blue fire, and behind them came the machines, tall and heavy, walking on steel legs. Their glowing cores lit the cave like a frozen storm. Jace gripped the metal pipe, his hands slick with blood and water. He knew he could not fight them, not with this, not with his human strength. But something inside him whispered, "Don't give up, don't die here." He looked at the predator, and the predator looked back at him. For one long moment, they understood each other. No words, no language, just survival. The hunters spoke, their voices sharp like broken glass. Jace did not know the words, but the meaning was clear. They wanted him, they wanted the cubs, and maybe they wanted the predator dead. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, taller than the others, its mask burned with a single red eye, glowing like fire. It raised its hand, and the machine stopped. The cave fell silent except for the drip of water and the pounding of Jace's heart. The leader pointed at Jace, and the air turned cold. The predator growled, a deep rumble that shook the stone. The cubs whimpered, pressing closer to Jace. The machines took one slow step forward, and the sound echoed like thunder. Jace whispered to himself, "Not like this, I'm not dying like this." Then everything exploded. The predator moved like lightning, leaping past Jace, its roar tearing through the cave. It hit the first machine, claws tearing metal, sparks raining down. The hunters fired, bolts of blue energy lighting up the dark. Stone shattered, water hissed into steam. Jace grabbed the cubs and ran, staying low as blasts tore the air. Heat burned his back. The sound was deafening. He slid behind a wall of rock, pulling the cubs close. His mind screamed, "Think, think." He saw broken pieces of the machines, metal glowing with blue energy, and an idea hit him like fire. He crawled to the wreckage, grabbing a piece of sharp metal still hot with power. It burned his hands, but he didn't let go. He tied it to the end of his pipe with strips from his torn clothes. His heart pounded as he made his weapon, stronger now, glowing faintly blue. The predator roared again, smashing a hunter into the stone. The machines fired together. beams cutting through the air. The predator moved fast, but not fast enough. A blast hit its side, tearing fur and flesh. The beast roared in pain, but kept fighting. Jace stood, his new weapon in hand. His legs shook. His lungs burned, but he stepped out from the shadows. He was done running. He looked at the cubs and said softly, "Stay," though he knew they wouldn't. Then he charged. The first hunter turned, its glowing eyes locking on him. It raised its weapon, but Jace was faster. He drove the glowing spear into its chest. The armor cracked. Sparks exploded. The hunter screamed and fell. Jace ripped the weapon free, his hands covered in blue fire. The other hunters turned toward him, bolts of energy flashing through the air. Jace rolled behind a rock, his body shaking. The predator leaped over him, slamming into the hunters with a roar that shook the mountain. Together they fought, man and beast. The predator ripped armor. Jace struck with his spear, blood and sparks mixing on the stone. One by one the hunters fell, but the machines were still there. Their legs crashed through the cave, their weapons humming louder. Jace ran toward the nearest machine, climbing its metal leg like a spider. It shook and fired, beams cutting the air. He stabbed his spear into a glowing joint. Blue light burst out. The machine screamed like a dying animal and crashed into the river. The predator tore into another machine, its claws ripping cables. But a third machine stepped forward, its weapon glowing brighter than the sun. Jace jumped down, rolling across the stone. His body ached, his breath toward his throat. The predator faced the last machine. It's for smoking, blood dripping. The leader of the hunters watched from the shadows, silent and still, its red eye burning like a star. It raised one hand, and the machine's core began to glow white, hotter than fire. Jace knew what that meant. It was going to kill everything. In the cave, predator, cubs, him, all of it. He ran, his legs screaming with pain. He grabbed a piece of broken metal glowing with blue energy and hurled it at the core. The piece struck, sparks exploding. The machine shuddered. The glow turned wild, out of control. The predator roared and leaped, slamming into the machine with all its strength. The blast was like the end of the world. Light swallowed everything. Heat tore the air. Jace felt himself lifted, thrown into darkness. The sound of the explosion faded into silence. When he opened his eyes, everything was smoke and dust. The cave was broken, stone fallen, water rushing through cracks. He coughed, his chest burning, his ears rang. He looked around. The cubs were there, shaking but alive. He pulled them close, whispering, "It's okay, it's okay," though nothing was okay. Then he saw movement through the smoke, glowing eyes. The predator stepped out, its body torn and bleeding, but still alive. It limped toward him. Slow but strong, the cubs ran to it, crying softly. The predator bent down, touching its head to Jace's shoulder, like a promise, like a bond. Then the ground shook again. The sound came from deep in the cave, not the roar of beasts, not the hum of machines, but something worse, a low rumble, growing louder, like the planet itself was waking up. And then Jace realized the truth. The fight had awakened something older, something bigger, and it was coming.